Hey there, Angela Mosley with Modern Fit Moms. Welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 4 poses you can do if you have a symptomatic day from prolapse. So number 1, we need to identify what is causing those symptoms. I hear this all the time, and I always tell, anytime I get a message, I'm like, okay, well, we need to identify what triggered those symptoms. Sometimes we can pinpoint it and sometimes we can't, and that's okay, as long as we have a solution going forward. So many women will think that maybe they lifted too heavy, or maybe they moved wrong, or whatever the case might be. And I'm like, it doesn't mean that you inherently did anything wrong. Your body is just adjusting to whatever it is that you did. Now, some women will feel a lot of heaviness and pressure by standing all day, or maybe they've had a really heavy lifting day, or maybe they were carrying their kids extra a lot that day, and they might feel a little bit extra symptomatic. Some women might experience symptoms right before you get your period. So that week before your period, you might feel heaviness and pressure. And so you might need to incorporate this. But like I said, the most important thing is to track to figure out what actually could be the culprit of your symptoms. Now, for me, what is typically the culprit is not my workouts in and of itself. I'm able to lift 147 pounds on my back for a squat and get my hips below my knees without having issues. But the one thing that is my issue is if I'm ever constipated or if I'm ever stressed out. Those two go hand in hand. When I'm stressed out because I'm dealing with something extra that month or that season, then it typically leads into constipation, and then the two go hand in hand. And so then I end up with having prolapse symptoms. Now, I'm usually able to fix it within, a very short time frame, within that same day or within that same hour. Once I release my bowels, I'm able to go. But there are some days where I'm feeling a little bit heavier than normal, not that full-blown flare-up of prolapse symptoms, but maybe just a little bit heavier. And so then I add in some of these exercises because stress is really the thing that gets my body and gets my prolapse. So again, you want to track it to see what's actually going on and what could have caused your symptoms to have a flare-up. Like I said, for me, it's stress, constipation, traveling, sitting a lot, or maybe you did go a little bit too heavy and your pelvic floor wasn't ready for it. You just regress, and it's not that you have to start over. We just have to figure it out. Now, the number one most important thing is pressure management. I'm not going to cover that in today's video, but the other thing I do want to cover is your breathing. So your diaphragmatic breathing. So our diaphragm sits right underneath our rib cage. It helps to pull air in when we inhale, and the diaphragm literally flattens out with our inhale. But sometimes this system is messed up. So again, we're not going to cover that in today's video, but I want you to build awareness because it does matter when it comes to pressure management. So we want to think we have that nice 360-degree pattern. So inhaling into the ribs, the front, the back, and the sides, and then down into the abdomen and down into the pelvic floor. But a lot of the times what can happen is maybe we have a stuck rib cage, or maybe we're not getting that full 360-degree pattern. And so then all of the breath goes straight down into our pelvic floor, creating more of those heaviness and prolapse sensations. So in the poses today, I really want you to think about filling up your rib cage, because when we can spread out the rib cage, we can spread it up top in that 360-degree pattern, then less pressure is going to go down onto the pelvic floor. Whereas if you're used to belly breathing, or maybe, like I said, you had a stuck rib, then all the breath is going to go right into the pelvic floor, and you're going to continue to feel that pressure and prolapse. So I really want you to pay attention to that in the poses that I'm going to share with you today. The most important, what we're going to do is that breathing in that 360-degree pattern, focusing on filling up the rib cage, because then that will take pressure off the pelvic floor. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. I've got a chair, I've got a yoga block, I've got a pillow. You can also use a rolled up towel, anything that feels supportive. So because again, like for me, what triggers my symptoms is stress. And so we really want to come into a relaxed position to support our bodies, to reduce that tension, help us with our breathing, which our breathing will help us with that, to calm the mind and calm the body down. And then I also have a wall as well. All right, so go ahead, grab your props. This is not a full follow along, but I do want you to test it out to see what feels best in your body. Okay, so the very first is going to be our feet on the chair, or you can use a bench, or you can use a couch, or, even just a stack of pillows on your bed. The goal is to get our hips up so that our knees are above our lower abdominals, because that will help to pull with that gravity to pull the prolapse back in, take the pressure off, and take any of that heaviness off. So I'm going to use a pillow to support myself. Like I said, you can also use a rolled up towel as well. And so I'm going to place my feet on the chair chair, and I'm just going to use the pillow and then position it however I need so that everything kind of just falls back in, right? So as we have our hips elevated, then everything can kind of just fall back in. And so now you can just simply focus on just relaxing here. Take your hands out to the side, and maybe you set a timer for about 10 minutes, and you can just seriously just focus and relax. Another thing that you can work on if you feel up to it, and if you know that you don't have any pelvic floor tension, is you can focus on your breathing with some activation to pull everything back up and in. So again, we want to think that nice 360-degree pattern. So I want you to think inhaling into your rib cage. So your rib cage is expanding out to the sides, it's expanding to the front and down into the back. And then on that exhale, you could think about picking everything up and allowing gravity to support you, but also your breath to support you, and doing a lift of the pelvic floor. Now, again, totally optional. If you have stress in your life and you know you have pelvic floor tension, because that's, like I said, usually the culprit for me as to why I would have prolapse symptoms, then you just really want to relax. You really just want to focus on your inhale, getting into the rib cage and into the front and down into the back. So we'll do one together with just the breathing, and then we'll do one together with activating the pelvic floor. So I am going to take my hands to my rib cage, and I want to use it as feedback to see if I can fill up my ribs. So I'm going to suction the tongue to the roof of my mouth, and then I'm going to slide it back because this is going to help support head positioning, and I'm going to keep my mouth closed. I'm going to inhale through my nose, and then I will open my mouth to exhale and open everything up. So inhale through your nose, suction the tongue to the roof of my mouth, and then exhale. Everything comes out nice and gently. Now, the idea with this is that you want to let all the breath come all the way out. So I want you to get all of that breath all the way out of your system, okay? And so that's number one, is just focusing on your inhale and your exhale. And then if you want to add in some activation because you know that you don't have pelvic floor tension, you can. And like I said, the gravity of your pelvis shifted down is going to help pull some of that back in. So go ahead, do another inhale, but this time we're going to activate the pelvic floor with our exhale. So inhale, use your hands as feedback. You can have one hand on the rib and then one hand on your abdomen to kind of think about scooping down and using that hand as feedback as well. So inhale through the nose and exhale. So same thing, you should let the exhale come all the way out. You should have felt your lower abdominals turn on, and especially because our pelvis is slightly tilted because of the support of the pillow, you really should have felt those lower abdominals come on. So those are two ways that you can do this position or this pose, is simply just relaxing and allowing gravity do its job. You can add in the breathing, so there's really three. You can add in just your inhale and relaxation, and then of course you can add in your inhale with that nice expansion and then with that pelvic floor lift. Okay, so position number 2 is pretty much the same, except we're going to place our feet up against the wall. So some may not be able to get into this position, and so that's why I like to show the chair position, because this is probably more advanced, especially if you are lacking mobility. You can also do this on your bed. If you have a headrest on your bed, you will place your feet up the wall that way, so you have something nice and cushioned to be on. Now you could do this with or without the pillow. So it's basically, you're just going to place your feet up above, and so you can place the pillow underneath your head, or you can place your pillow underneath your hips as well to really support gravity pulling everything back in. So same like we did with the chair, we can use that breathing here. You can either just sit and relax. I like to do this I try to do it every night for about 10 minutes. This helps me decompress from the day. It helps me to de-stress, and it just it helps my pelvic floor. It feels really good. And so I like to do this before bedtime. I even have a weighted eye mask that I put in the freezer, and I literally plop it. It is like the best bedtime routine ever for prolapse and for stress. So I absolutely love it. So you can either do that, or like I said, you can do the breathing in this position as well. So same thing, you're just going to inhale through the nose allowing the expansion. And then exhale, you can think about lifting the pelvic floor as you exhale all the way out. And because gravity will help to pull it back in, that will help as well. Okay, so our third position is an inverted position. I'm going to show you 2 variations of this position that can help support your prolapse. I was actually teaching a group fitness class and I started incorporating this into our warm up. And one of the moms that does have prolapse, she was like, wow, this feels really good. And I'm like, yeah, I know it does, doesn't it? And so I was like, I really need to make a video on these poses because I know it could be so helpful. They're so simple, but yet they can really make a big difference, especially at the end of the day when your prolapse is heavy or your pelvic floor just feels heavy and you just want to relax and let go. These are just such good poses. Now, these next 2 poses are similar. We're just going to have a different modification or a variation of it. And so they're going to be more involved, we'll just say. So it might not be as relaxing as the other 2 poses. So just keep that in mind when you're choosing which exercise you choose to do. All right. So the very first one is just going to be a puppy pose. So you want to think you're going to rest your head on the mat and you're going to have your hips up above. And so you can think about your breathing here as well. So same exact thing that we did before in our supine position with our legs up. Is you're going to think about breathing into your rib cage here and expanding through the rib cage into the back, to the front, and to the sides. And then you can just focus on your inhale, or you can add in that pelvic floor activation. But what I like to do with this position is I like to hold the core. So when you exhale and you add in that pelvic floor activation, you brace your core. So when we brace our core and we take our next inhale, then the breath has to go to other spots. And so a lot of women with prolapse have core weakness. And so this can be a really good strategy to use to strengthen your deep core muscles, but also to help with getting your breath into other spots that might seem sticky or maybe have some discomfort, such as your tailbone and your low back. And so this is a really good exercise, especially if you have posterior pelvic floor tightness. This is a great exercise to incorporate into your routine. So very first is just simply focusing on your breathing, no exhale necessary. You can use anything you want to support your head. And then number 2 is going to be adding in that pelvic floor contraction. And at the end of our exhale, we're going to keep our abs braced and take our next inhale. So go ahead, join me now. Inhale through the nose. Get that nice expansion. And then exhale, lift the pelvic floor as you exhale from the breath or from the mouth. Once all of the breath comes all the way out, I want you to hold those abdominals. So I'm holding that abdominal brace. That does not mean I'm holding up the pelvic floor the whole time. Okay. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my next inhale. And so my inhale has to go into my other spots. So inhale. And then exhale. And you're going to do another pelvic floor contraction all the way out. So the idea is that you're not holding a pelvic floor contraction the whole time. You're just bracing your abdominals so that the breath has to go into the other sticky spots. And so this can feel really supportive, especially like I said, with that contraction with the legs up the wall, help pulls the gravity because my hips are above my upper body, helps pull everything down and in. Now, another variation that I love with this is using the block to add in another more elevation. You can also use a chair. You can place your knees on a chair. Again, if you have that mobility and flexibility to do that, you can also do that. But I like to place my knees on the block, and then I'm going to come down into a puppy pose. So this is really going to help open up the posterior pelvic floor. And so like I said, for me, that's where I have a lot of my tightness is in the back of the pelvic floor. So I personally love to think of opening up my rectum, opening up like a flower or blooming like a flower. Maybe that's TMI for you, but that's what I like to think of. And so I want to think my elbows are down on the mat. Same thing with that puppy pose. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to inhale through my nose, expanding the breath into the rib cage. And then exhale, I'm going to lift the pelvic floor as I exhale everything from my mouth.
And I'm going to try to keep that core brace and take my next inhale. Now, especially for someone with posterior pelvic floor tightness, because we're bracing the front, this is going to address more of those lower abdominals and more of that front pelvic floor while getting the breath into the posterior pelvic floor. So again, like someone like me who really struggles with posterior pelvic floor tightness, this is going to be great because it's that posterior pelvic floor tightness that really bothers my rectus prolapse. So you can add those into your bedtime routine. You can add this into at the end of your workout. You can add it as part of your warm up. If you would like, I would prefer the inversion on the mat as part of my warm up, and then legs up the wall or legs on the chair as my cool down, as well as a part of my bedtime routine. So I would pick and choose, play around with it, see what feels good in your body, and then just implement it into your day. Again, these are just a few things to help relieve some symptoms. Now, you should know by now, if you've been following me, that it takes a system. It takes a method. You can't just pick and choose different exercises and think it's going to be a magic fix, because it's not. It is consistency, strength training, breathing, posture, core, all the things over a period of time that's going to get you to success. If you are ready for my 90-day pelvic floor lifting program, make sure to check out the comments below. You'll get access to 90 days inside the Fit Mom membership through the Core Lift method. This is where I take you from point A to point B, getting you back to running without leaking, getting you back to lifting weights without heaviness and pressure from your prolapse. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and share with a mama friend that could use this.